I'm Randy Bush. Thank you for joining me on this podcast we call Into the Words. This is the last in these weekly series. If you'd like to see some of the other ones that we've done over the past weeks, you can go to the church's website at woodschurch.org or on YouTube. But it's been a joy to present a range of my favorite books, and I'm closing out this series with perhaps my favorite author, and her name is Annie Dillard. This is a compilation book that has 3 of her works in it, but we'll be reading from 2 books, beginning with the book Pilgrim at Tinker Creek. Annie Dillard was born in 1945 back in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. One of the wonderful serendipities of my time when I served a church in Pittsburgh was that I actually lived in one of the houses where she had grown up. It belonged to her grandparents, and when her grandparents died, she and her family moved into it in an area called Point Breeze. Annie Dillard has been an amazing writer over the years. She, as I said, grew up in Pittsburgh. She later moved on to the Pacific Northwest, and that affected some of her essays and writings. And now she's retired with some occasional teaching gigs in Connecticut. She's an essayist and a novelist and a poet, and her style combines words about life and faith with a very keen eye about nature. In fact, the most famous book of hers, the one that she wrote in 1974 and won a Pulitzer Prize for in 1975, is the work called Pilgrim at Tinker Creek. She kept journals of what she saw in nature as she would explore simply the simple rushing waters of a small creek in Roanoke, Virginia. Out of those journals came an amazing work of reflection and essays called The Pilgrim at Tinker Creek. So I want to share a couple selections from that before turning to one of her later essay collections. So she offers these words first. Of all known forms of life, only about 10% are still living today. All other forms, fantastic plants, ordinary plants, living animals with unimaginably various wings, tails, teeth, and brains, are utterly and forever gone. That is a great many forms that have been created. Multiplying 10 times the number of living forms today yields a profusion that is quite beyond what I consider thinkable. So why so many forms? Why not just that one hydrogen atom? The Creator goes off on one wild specific tangent after another, or millions simultaneously with an exuberance that would never seem to be warranted, with an abandoned energy that springs from an unfathomable font. What is going on here? The point of the dragonfly's terrible lip, the giant water bug, the bird songs, or the beautiful dazzle and flash of sunlighted minnows. It's not that it all fits together like clockwork, because it doesn't particularly, but that it all flows so freely wild like the creek. It all surges in such a free, fringed tangle. Freedom is the world's water and weather, the world's nourishment freely given, its soil and its sap, and it seems our Creator loves pizzazz. Talking again about our Creator, and in fact, the world that has been made, she opens another section by quoting the writer Huston Smith. In nature, wrote Huston Smith, the emphasis is in what is, rather than what ought to be. I learn this lesson in a new way every day. It must be that in a certain sense, only the newborn in this world are whole, that as adults, we are expected to be somewhat nibbled. It's par for the course. Physical wholeness is not something we have barring accident. It is itself accidental, an accident of infancy, like a baby's fontanelle or the egg tooth on a hatchling. I think of all the beautiful animals, the sharks I saw from ashore, that are hefted and held aloft in a light-shot wave. Were those sharks sliced with scars? Were there mites in their hides and worms in their hearts? Did the mockingbird that plunged from the rooftop, folding its wings, bear in its buoyant quills a host of sucking lice? Is our birthright and heritage to be like Jacob's cattle in the Bible, a life of a nation founded ring streaked, speckled, spotted, not with the spangling marks of a grace-like beauty rained down from eternity, but the blotched assaults of time upon us? We are all of us clocks whose faces tell the passing years. The young man proudly names his scars for his lover. The old man alone before a mirror erases his scars with his eyes and then sees himself whole. So she talks very honestly about how we go through life gaining our scars, and we should not be surprised that it not be otherwise. A collection of essays she wrote in the early 80s is called Teaching a Stone to Talk. These were a collection that came from various sources, but probably the most famous of all of these essays is one when she writes about going to see a total eclipse of the sun, where she drove up to a mountaintop with some other people and then described her experience. It began with no ado. It was odd that such a well-advertised public event should have no starting gun, no overture, no introductory speaker. I should have known right then that I was out of my depth. Without pause or preamble, silent as orbits, a piece of the sun went away. We looked at it through welder's goggles. A piece of the sun was missing, and in its place we saw empty sky. And then she describes the actual event of the eclipse. She says, "The deepest and most terrifying detail was this. I have said that I heard screams. I have since read that screaming with hysteria is a common reaction even to expected total eclipses. People on all the hillsides, including I think myself, screamed when the black body of the moon detached from the sky and rolled over the sun. But something else was happening at that same instant, and it was this, I believe, which made us scream. The second before the sun went out, we saw a wall of dark shadow come speeding at us. We no sooner saw it than it was upon us like thunder. It roared up the valley. It slammed our hill and knocked us out. It was the monstrous, swift shadow cone of the moon. I've since read that this wave of shadow moves at 1,800 miles an hour. Language can give no sense of this sort of speed. 1,800 miles an hour. It was 195 miles wide. No end was in sight. You saw only the edge. And it rolled at you across the land at 1,800 miles an hour, hauling darkness like plague behind it. Seeing it and knowing it was coming straight for you was like feeling a slug of anesthesia shoot up your arm. If you think very fast, you might have time to think, soon it will hit my brain. You can feel the deadness race up your arm. You can feel the appalling, inhuman speed of your own blood. We saw the wall of shadow coming, and we screamed before it hit. And this was a universe about which we had read so much, but never before felt. The universe as a clockwork of loose spheres flung at stupefying, unauthorized speeds. How could anything moving so fast not crash, not veer from its orbit, amuck like a car out of control at a turn? And less than 2 minutes later, when the sun emerged, the trailing edge of the shadow sped away. It coursed down our hill and raced eastward over the plain, faster than the eye could believe. It had clobbered us, and now it roared away. We blinked in the light. It was as though an enormous, loping god in the sky had reached down and slapped the earth's face. And then to conclude, after the eclipse, she said, when the sun appeared as a blinding bead on the ring's side, the eclipse was over. The black lens cover appeared again, backlighted, and slid away. And at once the yellow light made the sky blue again, and the black lid dissolved and vanished, and the real world began there. And I remember that we all hurried away. We were born and bored all in a stroke. We rushed down the hill. We found our car. We saw the other people streaming down the hillsides, and we joined the highway traffic, and we drove away. And we never looked back. It was a general vamoose, and an odd one, for when we left the hill, the sun was still partially eclipsed, a sight rare enough, and one which in itself we probably would have driven 5 hours to see. But enough is enough. One turns at last even from glory itself with a sigh of relief. From the depths of mystery, and even from the heights of splendor, we bounce back and hurry for the latitudes of home. Even from glory itself, we turn aside with a sigh of relief. As you go through your days, may you have moments on mountaintops. May you have grace that guides you in the valleys. May you find strength in friendship. I'm grateful for the friendship and support of Ed Lambert and Dad Atkinson, who've made these videos possible each week. So go forth by faith. May God be with you as you continue your own journeys into the words.